Right. Okay. Should I just start then?
Yep.
Okay. Well, my notes aren't loading, so I'm just gonna have to. So like this. Like, okay. So yeah, welcome to the podcast. Yeah, I'm Nick. I'm your host, and yeah, like, God, sorry. I just need a while. It's hard without my notes, but like, okay. Okay. Yeah. So this is Elections Weekly Beyond the Spin. Am I getting that right? That's the name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just like letting everyone know how we're going to be running things. Like we have a panel here. There's four people in the panel. There's me. Sorry. I'm just going to go straight to introductions. So like, first of all, we have Eric. He's our editor-in-chief in Elections Daily. Yeah, how are you doing?
Awesome. Yeah. Great to be here.
Yeah.
Never thought we did a podcast.
Good. And then.
Never thought we did a podcast.
Yeah, I'll get used to this. Okay. Yeah. Next we have Genya, Florida. Yeah, Florida elections official and Twitter celebrity. Yeah. Yeah, and then we also have Harris. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, sorry, still a bit nervous, but I'll get into it. And then yeah, so that's our panel. That's who's going to be part of the main conversation. Then we have Jared over here, who will be here for our first two sections, just to like give a couple of comments on these parts. And my notes have loaded. Okay, I'll just get that out now.
Is that better? Oh, sorry, that was for Eric.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry for the delay. Yeah, I'm just getting out my notes. Here we go. Yeah. So okay. So later on in this episode, we'll be discussing the special election in California's 25th district, which is coming up in just 5 days. So we'll be taking a deep dive into that. I know Jenya's prepared a few things for that. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say. And then we'll be taking a look forward to November for the House elections then, specifically on the northeastern ones, and I know Harrison's prepared a few things for that. But yeah, also we'll be taking questions from the audience. If the YouTube live thing is working as planned, and at the end of the episode, I've prepared trivia questions. The trivia sort of being improvised a bit. I haven't really taken much time to prepare for that, but yeah, I'll see how that goes. But yeah, first of all, we're just going to be talking about the Senate races. Just jump straight into that. Yeah, we don't actually have all the members that we needed, but is everyone okay to just jump straight in, or should we just?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, over the past few weeks we've had a ton of polls for Senate races, and the main takeaway here is that the Senate may be closer than Democrats thought it would have been, like, at the start of the cycle. And yeah, at the moment their easiest path would be to win the presidency, as well as flipping Arizona, Colorado, Maine, and North Carolina, while losing Alabama. So that would put them at 50 seats with a vice presidential tiebreaker. So that would essentially give them control of the Senate. Yeah, and then beyond that, there are a couple more states which they could take up. So I have 6 down here. So we have Alaska, both the Georgia seats, Iowa, Kansas, Montana. That's 6, and then a few other long shot states. So yeah, we're just going to be jumping straight into the polls. So they've shown good news for Mark Kelly in Arizona, Gary Peters in Michigan, Cal Cunningham in North Carolina. So they all have like pretty consistent leads. Surprise leads for Barbara Bollier in Kansas and Steve Bullock in Montana. We've seen a couple of polls that show good news for them. And closer than expected margins for Democrats in in Georgia and Iowa. In both of Georgia seats, there was an internal a couple of days ago. So overall, the news is looking quite good, Democrats. It could change in the future, but we'll see what happens. We're just going to cover those polls and jump right into it. I want to bring Eric in on this because I know you're from North Carolina. So that's a competitive state.
So I'll go over North Carolina really quick, but I'll also go over Alaska because Alaska is an interesting outside race.
Don't sleep on Alberta.
Getting some attention. Yeah. So North Carolina, you got Tom Tillis, who's the Republican, Cal Cunningham, who's the Democrat. No relation. We're not all related. But so the thing with North Carolina is I think there's some weird polling going on. I've not been entirely convinced by the polls showing a large Cunningham lead. I think it could be possible that he's ahead. The problem is I don't think he's a very good candidate, and I think I have very good reason to believe this. Going back to basically his history, he has no electoral record at all. He was elected to one term in the state senate from, I think, 2000 to 2002 in a gerrymandered House seat in western North Carolina. Once it came around, they couldn't actually keep it any bluer, so they just dismantled the seat and he left. He served in the war, so that's good for his resume. Runs for the Senate in 2010 as a Democrat. He has national Democratic support. The SCC, all the national groups coming in and endorsing him. And he loses the primary, not just close, he loses it in a landslide to Elaine Marshall, who's a Democrat, very well known in North Carolina, but isn't someone who actually wins those sorts of primaries. She's run for the Senate before and failed multiple times. And then she got smoked in the general by Richard Burr. He won a ton of Democratic counties that haven't gone red since. So that's not a good sign for him because he lost to a bad candidate in the primary. This time he showed weakness with black voters in his primary. He did very poorly with them. So looking at it right now, basically he's positioned to do pretty good with suburban white voters. The problem is I don't think he can win over the rural voters because he doesn't have that background. It's not like he's elected. He's like people talked about this guy in Kentucky. If he had won the gubernatorial race, he could have won over some of the coal areas, right? I'm trying to remember his name. Rodney Atkins. He's not Rodney Atkins. Yeah, he's not him. He's like he basically hasn't held office in 20 years. And he's kind of been kept by Chuck Schumer. He's kind of kept him fundraising instead of campaigning, which is good for money, but you actually got to go out and talk to voters eventually. So I think it's entirely possible that he has a lead. I think Deborah Robertson is kind of the lead over Richard Burr, something like that. I just don't think that's going to be – it could be the tipping point. But Maine, I think, is more close to the tipping point than North Carolina. The other race, which is fascinating, is Alaska. So I wrote an article last year pitching the idea that parties should kind of think about running independent candidates as stalking horses. So, like, instead of running a candidate of their party in a race they're doomed to lose, right? Like, you have a ton of popular Democratic, Republican governors who can never sniff federal office. Just let him ditch the party label, run as an independent, and caucus. It almost worked in Kansas in 2016 or 2014 for the Democrats. They had a candidate who was very credible, Greg Orman, and he ran very close, much closer than anyone in Kansas has for a while. Alaska is interesting in that it allows you to do that on the ballot. So Democrats, Libertarians, and Independents can all run in the same primary. And the Democratic Party can endorse the winner of another party if they win the overall primary. So in the House, they have Elise Galvin, who came close to unseating Don Young last time. She's running again as an independent with Democratic affiliation. The Senate, they have another guy. His name's getting off of my head right now. I can't remember his name, but he's credible. He's raised money, and he's running as an independent caucusing Democrat.
So, are you talking about for the Senate in Alaska? Sorry, just
yeah. So this is Alaska.
Yeah, so that's how it goes, yeah.
It's a very red state, but it's got a lot of Native American voters. Drew Savicki wrote a great article about Alaska, which kind of goes over the unique situation. They have a lot of Native American voters. Most of the Republicans are in urban areas, which is a red flag for Republicans in general. Most Republicans are centered in Anchorage or other big cities by Alaska standards. So that's one that Democrats could look at and be like, we might not be able to win this race. but we could make Republicans spend. That's kind of what the benefit of this stuff like this in Alaska, Montana, even to an extent South Carolina and Kentucky, doomed candidacies from the start, but they have so much money, you kind of have to spend a little bit, and that detracts you from Colorado, it detracts you from New Hampshire or Michigan or Minnesota or a ton of states Republicans want to stretch out to. So that's kind of my spiel on those, kind of where I see those at.
I wanted to say some things about the Arizona Senate race, which is looking like behind Colorado, the Democrats' second best chance at a pickup in the Senate. Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball wrote an article not long ago about the core four Senate races, which they consider on the DSCC's campaign side to be Colorado, Arizona, North Carolina, and Maine. And those were basically listed by order of likelihood that they're going to flip. Now, both Colorado and Arizona are states where the Democrats have seen increasingly favorable odds in recent years. Michael Bennet won re-election to the Senate in 2016, and obviously the state voted for Hillary Clinton that year. In addition to that, in 2018, Kyrsten Sinema defeated Martha McSally when she was running as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for the seat in the close race, and became the first Democratic senator from Arizona since Dennis DeConcini in the 1990s, which was a big deal for the Democrats then. And now they have a chance to have a delegation of 2 Democratic senators come 2021, because they've got a former astronaut in Mark Kelly, who's a solid Democratic candidate, running against Martha McSally, who, as you guys know, was appointed to the seat after interim Senator John Kyle, who was appointed to replace John McCain, decided not to run. McSally has had a controversial record. She has the fighter pilot background and the support of Trump, who still has some popularity in the state, but overall it's a state that's trending towards the Democrats incrementally, and it's going to be one of those battlegrounds in 2020 on the presidential level, and I certainly think the presidential race will have an impact on the Senate race for sure. Maricopa County and the suburban trend towards the Democrats that helped elect Sinema is certainly going to be a big deal in this election, and McSally so far is performing worse in polling as an appointed incumbent than she did against Sinema in the polls in 2018. And, well, people will argue that this is not going to be a deep +7 year again if you remove unopposed House races. It still could be a year where it's somewhat favorable to the Democrats in the climate. And Arizona is a seat that's generally ranked as lean Democrat now. And the justifications I have for that here, I pulled up some data. Currently, according to the Real Clear Politics polling average, Kelly has an average polling lead of 8%. Some of these polls aren't very good. For example, Public Policy Polling is not a very good polling organization, but Monmouth gets an A from the 538 team, and Ohio Predictive Insights gets a B. And both of those polls showed Kelly ahead by 6 and 9 points, respectively. Another thing to bring up here with this race is the fundraising. Fundraising is critical in any state, especially states with high urban centers like Phoenix, where you have a lot of money in the urban areas to buy into the media markets there. And Mark Kelly has raised or received $30 million in contributions to McSally's $18 million. Now, what I like to say about McSally is McSally's fundraising would be absolutely amazing had she been an incumbent in any other state. That is completely stellar fundraising there. But against Mark Kelly, it's just not good enough. Many people have asked, where does Mark Kelly get all of this money? He's doing a great job at ground game fundraising in Arizona and bringing in money from around the country. So it's going to be a race to watch. It's probably the Democrats' second most likely flip opportunity. But Mark Kelly is a much better candidate than John Hickenlooper in Colorado. Hickenlooper just has a more favorable environment there. So I think that Arizona Senate's a race to watch on election night. And if somehow McSally pulls off an upset here, that probably means President Trump was reelected. So this is a race that's definitely a race that Democrats should expect to win because they've got a really good candidate here.
Mm-hmm. And that fundraising is crazy. I mean, that's closer to presidential level fundraising for Mark Kelly than it is for senator. It is astronomical, off the chart.
Yeah, Florida and Texas came close. You had Florida around $100 million was spent, similar in Texas by the end of the cycle. But you're definitely right. It's rare to see that much money spent on a Senate race.
I loved how you said it was astronomical. Good pun.
Yeah.
What are you saying now about Mark Kelly?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's worth noting he's not an astronaut like Bill Nelson is an astronaut. Bill Nelson went to space, but he wasn't an astronaut. Mark Kelly is a legitimate astronaut.
Yeah,
like that was
service in the ISS for a long time.
Yeah.
No, I just have a couple of comments on that. Like, first, I know Harrison mentioned Kelly's polling lead. Like, I seem to remember, like, I checked back on the 2018 race. I remember Cinema having like a pretty big lead in the early days of our campaign. So I'm sort of a bit cautious about whether Kelly's polling lead will keep up. But he's definitely running ahead of Biden, like as of now, like a couple of points ahead of Biden. Yeah, so that's definitely good news for him. And also someone, either Harrison or Eric, mentioned.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to your point really quickly. He's actually running 4 points ahead of Biden if you look at the averages right now.
4 points, yeah. Yeah, no, I was thinking 2 points. Someone mentioned how there haven't been many reputable pollsters, any good pollsters. Like, someone mentioned public policy polling. Yeah, like, I sort of agree with that. I think we need to get more good polls out of
Monmouth is good.
Out of into these competitive races. I tweeted about that a couple of days ago. I think it's definitely I think it's definitely needed. I'm thinking particularly about the one in Montana as well, because people like, yeah, they didn't really believe it. They said that because Bullock was ahead by 7 in that one, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. One thing, if you don't mind me adding about the races, it's sort of vaguely related to the Senate race, but it has to do with the House in a way too, is that McSally only won Arizona's 6th district, which has Dave Schweikert as his representative. She only won it by 3% in her Senate race against Kirsten Sinema. And it's looking from the polling that's not going to be as competitive of a race as it was back in 2018, because Kelly has a pretty substantial lead that Kirsten Sinema didn't even have for most of the race. And so I think that in terms of the Senate race, that Arizona's 6th district could be competitive on that level. However, it's important to note that Schweikert did outrun McSally. He won re-election by around 11%. So while it could be a sleeper race, it is something to look at when you're talking about the margins per district in the various races that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No, I'm really interested in that.
I was just going to say it's important to note as well that post his 2018 re-election, Schweikert has been involved in some questionable dealings, and the House Ethics Committee actually opened an investigation into him. Still, his odds at re-election are looking pretty good in 2020, nonetheless.
He had a credible challenger in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, he has a decent challenger.
Yeah, she raised money. Credible as in she raised money.
She's outraising him right now.
She was the same person who came. Yeah, she was the same person who came within like 5 points of Arizona's 8th back in 2017. Was that?
That was with Debbie Lesko's special.
That was Debbie Lesko's seat.
Yeah. Cyril Tipperary. She's the one who's running against Schweikert. I'm not sure if she. Yeah, but she.
Yeah, she switched seats.
I mean,
it was a very close race.
So but she's running. Yeah, she's running now in 2020, and. I mean, sort of my gut tells me that she's a good candidate, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. And one more thing, I want to go back to something Harrison mentioned about PPP. One thing with North Carolina is the polls in North Carolina have not been very good. PPP loves to poll North Carolina, and they're almost always wrong. I know this can anger some people, but I've got to call them out on that. Their polls typically way over-favor Democrats in North Carolina. I think they had Cal Cunningham up by 9 points or something ridiculous by that margin.
Yeah, it looks like 7 right now.
Yeah, 7, and then I think SurveyMonkey had a poll with Cal Cunningham up by 9. But some of this is weird because there's
SurveyMonkey is trash.
Yeah, there's some weird demographic stuff going on in the polls. There's some issues with age. Basically, North Carolina polls tend to overstate Democrats just a little bit. That poll showed a Senate race that was competitive, and then Richard Burr won by 6 points in 2016. It was not a very close race at the end of it, so. That's something Republicans have to hope for in North Carolina, as opposed to they can't in Arizona, because not only are the polls better in Arizona, they're showing a very clearly, even in the polls that are good, that aren't skewed, that aren't made for one party or the other, right?
Yes, I also believe that the Arizona PPP poll was an internal poll for the Democrats, and even though 538 gives public policy polling a B rating, it's on the borderline of their BC rating classification. And I've talked to some people on election Twitter who have said that their polling has become less accurate over the years if you compare it to their past cycle.
Yeah, I mean, their biggest crime was holding back. They've been known to do some weird stuff for their polls. They've held back polling results that they thought haven't lined up with the public when these results have shown like a Republican win. I think there was one House race, a special election, where they had a poll that showed a clear Republican lead in the special election. They actually had the race right. They were dead on, and they did not release the poll because they didn't want to release something that would be negative for the Democrats in that race. That's why I'm very wary of them. They're known to put leading questions into polls. I think they're the polling firm that asked Republicans if they wanted to bomb Agrabah, the city from Aladdin. It's just they're known to pull weird stuff like that. I mean,
yeah. No, I was going to mention the. Sorry, I was going to say something then. I was going to mention the poll ratings because we've gotten a ton of polls in the last couple of weeks, but none of them seem to have been from reputable pollsters. They've all been from ones. I mean, mostly ones that I've never heard of. And something I really want is for those sorts of polls.
Something else to mention.
New York Times. Yeah.
Speaking of inaccurate polls, something else to mention, or not necessarily inaccurate, but in Montana, I believe the Montana poll showing Bullock up by 7 points over Daines was from Montana State University, and usually they have relatively low sample size, which leads to a somewhat high margin of error. So what I like to do with that poll is when you see a 47-39 Bullock lead, maybe add back the margin of error 4 or 5 points, whatever it was, and then you get a much closer 47-45 Bullock race, which is much more reasonable because Bullock is a strong fundraiser. It's definitely a lean R race. Bullock jumping into that race definitely it moved Daines from assured re-election to lean Republican for sure.
Mm-hmm. I was skeptical of that race, but I've kind of been swayed to the opinion it's competitive.
It will be competitive.
It will be competitive, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you don't mind,
I was talking to a couple of people on Twitter.
Yes.
Sorry, can I say that? I was talking to a couple of people the other day who was saying that sorry, I lost train of thought. Yeah, they were saying that we should completely ignore that poll because it was a huge outlier. But I think we should definitely not put all of our trust on it. But still, 7 points is quite a big lead. So
it was online polling, and
it's got to mean something. And even if it is, as Harrison said, it is in reality a 2 point lead. A 2 point lead is still a lead.
I think Jared wanted to mention something about.
So yeah, I mean, for now it's certainly not, but
for Jared, yeah.
But yeah, maybe that might change.
If you don't mind,
we'll see. Sorry,
we're sort of having a conversation, sort of jumping around. If I could sort of interject and talk a little bit about Michigan, which is sort of an interesting race. So Michigan is obviously a state that was won by a very narrow margin by Donald Trump back in 2016, and this is one of the reasons why Republicans believe that they might have a slight chance with John James, who was the challenger back in 2018 with Debbie Stabenow. He's running again against Gary Peters. And it's sort of an interesting race to watch. It's not one that's expected to be won by the GOP just because Trump's win was very narrow. Biden has been leading in several polls in Michigan. And also, I just want to quickly mention that there's sort of 3 areas that I at least have looked at to sort of analyze and see why John James is not going to have a really good chance. The first one is basically Kent County, which is the location of Grand Rapids and its immediate suburbs. It's a historically and ancestrally Republican area of Michigan. It's voted consistently for Republican candidates for the last at least 50 years, basically. However, Trump won it with less than 50% of the vote. And it's clear based on Governor Whitmer's performance there back in 2018. It's clear based on Stabenow's win in the county that it's a county that's probably going to go to Joe Biden, at least in my opinion. And I don't think it's something that's salvageable for Republicans, even in a Senate race. Second one, sorry, I just want to go fairly quickly so I don't spend too much time. Second one is Oakland County, historically suburban Republican county, northwest of Wayne County, which is where Detroit is. Again, historically Republican, but it is moving to the left. Haley Stevens, and Elisa Slotkin, they won back in 2018, and their districts extend very much into Macomb County. It's a county that is moving left because it is well-educated and it is suburban. The third one is Macomb County, because Oakland was before this. I want to go to Macomb, which is slightly east of there. Macomb County is a county that Trump won by an astonishing 12% margin, around something like that back in 2016. However, it voted for Democrats back in 2018. And depending on the Republican performance in the state, it'll be a very interesting county to watch. And also for the election between Biden and Trump, if Biden wins the county or if he keeps Trump down to a very small single-digit lead, it'll show that he has a lot of success coming for him in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, and Kent, as a Republican, Kent hits particularly hard for me. That's Grand Rapids. That's the hometown of Gerald Ford. That's where he represented in Congress. It'd be like Republicans losing Colorado Springs or Mesa, Arizona. Like, these are places where Republicans have been strong forever. And I think we actually had a comment in from James, who mentioned he wanted to comment that he expects the race to be somewhat close, because it's worth noting that Stabenow barely campaigned in 2018 and didn't run any ads against James. So James got through unscathed in terms of favorability and other aspects like that.
Yes, and something of note on that topic is that James is I would say he's a very good candidate. Conditions are going to be tough for him in 2020. However, Republican support is rising in rural areas. Historically, for example, Carl Levin's win back in 2008 rather, he won rural areas resoundingly. Those areas are now starting to vote much more Republican, up and down ballot. And so that's sort of a floor that he has to rest on, even if he does lose support in those three very important counties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people forget how.
Can I just say, you mentioned Kent County.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. I just want to mention Amash is from Kent County, isn't he?
Right.
So he could probably do well there if he was in the nation. That could affect presidentially.
And I was actually
that's all I want to say. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually I'm sort of going off the cuff, so I was thinking of saying that before I stopped myself. But Amash is sort of emblematic of that type of historical republicanism, fiscal conservatism, sort of social libertarianism that a lot of people have in the area. And obviously, he's sort of disenfranchised in a sense by Trump's rhetoric and by his policies, which is why he's running an independent campaign for president this year.
Yeah.
I actually think in the chat, Adam mentioned something important, which is that Kent County voted for Terry Lynn Lamb, a horrendously awful candidate. I mean, just historically bad candidate. This is someone who had an interview, was being interviewed by the press, and just left. She just had a meltdown.
She stopped campaigning a month before the election.
Yeah.
Didn't
and
she?
So,
yeah.
Yeah, she lost by like 12 points.
Yeah, it was a landslide.
Yeah.
They voted for her. They voted for her over Gary Peters, and they voted for Stabenow in 2018. Kind of gives you an idea. It's similar, smaller election, a smaller margin than 2014 was. Just something to know.
I had two quick things to bring up, I guess, before maybe Nick transfers this section of the commentary here to California 25. But I was just going to say, number one, because we're talking about Michigan, this is debated, and I know that Republicans will probably disagree, but some people have said that Trump's win in Michigan in 2016 was basically the equivalent of Obama's 2008 win in Indiana, and that it won't be replicated in 2020. And Michigan is still more competitive for Trump in 2020 than Indiana was for Obama in 2012, but I think it's still a valid comparison in how that will play down on the Senate race, which I think could end up being decided by a similar margin in the presidential year. And my final thing to say was, because we were talking about Montana earlier, and some Republicans are like, well, Democratic governors haven't had a very good record recently in red states running for Senate. And well, it's true that they haven't, and that Senate races are more partisan than gubernatorial elections. It's also important to note that Steve Bullock is the incumbent governor. He's currently in office, so the people know him very well. When Phil Bredesen ran against Marsha Blackburn in 2018, Phil Bredesen had been out of office since 2011. That's almost 7 years of being out of office at that point. When Ted Strickland ran against Rob Portman in 2016, a race that he lost in a landslide and far underperformed Clinton, he too had been out of office for a significant point of time at that point. So I think it's just relevant to bring that up just when talking about Bullock.
And importantly, Strickland had lost the last statewide election he was running, which was the gubernatorial race John Kasich had won. So he wasn't a good candidate to begin with because he had already lost statewide.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think that might cover all the Senate races. I know some people are probably going to say, but what about South Carolina and Kentucky? Those races are safe Republican. It's not worth talking about them. If you're a Democrat, please stop spending money there. I'm going to be your Republican friend and say you cannot win them. Don't waste your money on those races.
Yeah.
Every single penny you send to Amy McGrath is wasted. It just goes straight down the toilet.
And the Democrats that I've talked to 100% agree with that message as well. They just wish they could tell the donors to listen to the electoral analysts and spend it in the core 4 races instead of wasting it on races that are safe Republican.
Like at best, the money Amy McGrath gets at best is money that will let her win Elliott County. That's not
if you look at where the money comes from for Amy McGrath, it almost all comes from California and New York. There's barely any money that actually was donated from the state of Kentucky to her campaign. Plus, Amy McGrath on her own has a good message, fighter pilot, but she couldn't win in Kentucky's 6th district in 2018. And throughout the cycle, that was seen as a district that was going to flip. I remember early on election night 2018, that was supposed to be the kind of potential bellwether for how big the wave would be. Now, originally, I'm like, oh, they lost Kentucky 6. What's going to happen? But then the Democrats still ended up gaining a net gain of 40 seats. So that just shows you that McGrath wasn't as good of a candidate as she was hyped up to be.
It's more symbolic.
And this seat was drawn, it was drawn for Ben Chandler. That was a seat that was drawn to be a little bit more favorable if Democrats than a ballot.
Yeah. What do you want to say, Jared? I think.
By the way,
sorry, I was just going to say it's more of a symbolic gesture than anything. The idea of defeating the man who has single-handedly completely altered our judiciary by appointing young conservative justices, not only to the Supreme Court, but also to various appellate and other federal courts around the country. So it's highly impractical. He's going to win. He may even win Elliott County. I would not be surprised. But there's no reason Democrats invest in the resources in Kentucky.
To a lesser degree, South Carolina counts. I get the factor that you want to get rid of Lindsey Graham, but it's not worth it. It's just not. It's like Republican donating to unseat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Don't spend your money elsewhere.
The Democrats came close in the governor's race.
How they comparison base
They can't win the Senate race.
Yeah, within single digits, I think. Yeah, but
governor's races are much more elastic than Senate races.
Maybe, maybe like one time within 20 it will happen, but like it's definitely unlikely. By the way, Eric, I'm really glad that you mentioned it after. I just say I'm completely fascinated by. I don't think there are enough people looking at that race, so I'm glad that you brought it up.
I had to get on my soapbox because that's just something that just irks me, is seeing people just make bad decisions. I mean, the people who are spending money, they probably have enough money to buy multiple races.
Well, donors and their money are soon parted, right?
Yeah.
So should we move on? Yeah. No, Genya, you've been quite quiet. Is it, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think she's been waiting for California.
Or do you just want to because we're on California, it's right now, so it's.
There's certain things that I don't.
Yeah, this is your moment.
So I wouldn't be able to provide much intelligent commentary.
Yeah, I mean, this is your moment, though. So, so I'll let you have it. We're talking about California trends right now. So, on Tuesday evening, the results of the special election in California's 25th district will be coming in. So this district is based. Just for everyone who doesn't know, it's based in the northern part of Los Angeles County, crossing the Santa Fe. Okay, I don't know why I wrote that down. So, for that race, that's looking like it's a. I mean, it was looking like a Democratic lead at the start, but now it's looking like it might be. Sorry, the words are so small. I can't really read what I say. So it's a Democratic leading district. I mean, basically, Hillary Clinton won it by 7 points. So and then Katie Hill won it by 9. So people assumed that it would be a district, but now it looks like Garcia is doing pretty well. I mean, there haven't really been any polls for that race, so I'm just rambling. So I just want to pass it on to Genya now because I know you've been preparing a lot of stuff. So yeah, I'll
be glad when this race is over because it's all been the past 4 months and my family's about to stage mutiny. But this has been an interesting race. I mean, it was already going to be a media circus back in 2019 when Katie Hill unfortunately resigned. And it's been interesting to watch things develop since then. Mike Garcia has actually been gunning for this seat since Katie Hill won in 2018. So as far as laser focus, he's got it. He did not get distracted by anything. He just kept moving forward, relentlessly pursuing this seat, and he's got a very good shot of winning the seat, at least for the special. I think the Democrats at one point had the advantage. They really did, but they were focused on the wrong opponents. Nobody's going to convince me otherwise. They were focused on Steve Knight and what's his name, Cenk Uygur. And those were the
Yeah.
two least consequential opponents in the special primary. And had they not focused on Garcia, I think the Democrats could be a lot more confident about their chances for a win. Because right now it's up in the air, and I'm still sticking with toss-up till dark.
Okay.
One of the things about that whole district is it's LA County and part of Ventura County, but it's not like LA. It's very, I hate to say it, but it is kind of, it's the boondocks. And there are a lot of gun owners, there are a lot of ranchers, a lot of small business owners. It's more what California used to be like than what California currently is now. And it's one of those areas that is socially a lot more conservative than the typical, stereotypical California thing. And Republicans are never going to go away in that district. It's just that you need to have the right one. I mean, the district, and I used to live there, we got spoiled by Buck McKeon. He did a great job, and he took very good care of his constituents. And in California 25, you can't just phone it in. You actually have to, because it's full of Karens. You actually have to be the manager that they demand to speak to.
Oh, this is Santa Clarita. This is, Simi Valley.
You don't have to worry too much.
If you don't mind, I just sort of have a few anecdotes about this district too, because every summer, my summer camp is actually located in the Ventura County part of this district. And if you remember, I think Drew Savicki, he had a post about basically the headquarters of the Power Rangers being located in this district. That's part of my summer camp. So I guess just an anecdote. But I think, when you drive in there, when you drive in on the 118, the Ronald Reagan Freeway, and you see the big American flag welcoming you to Ventura County, and the demography and also the geography, I think it makes it very different, as Genya said, from the rest of LA. And you'll see how it's a lot less diverse. There are different levels of educational attainment depending on what part of the region you're in. But in general, Ventura County, the part of that that's in the district, has been a lot more conservative than the LA County part of it. And when you look at the analysis of these different elections, whether it's the presidential, whether it's the House, Ventura County pretty much always votes to the right of the LA County part of it. And it's really about the margin. For example, back in 2016, Steve Knight basically swamped his opponent in the Ventura County part of this district. However, he got a narrow victory in the LA County part. Those two together amounted to a pretty comfortable, decent victory for him in 2016. However, looking 2 years later, with Katie Hill's obvious victory, Steve Knight only won narrowly in Ventura County, whereas Katie Hill basically swamped him by around 11 points, I believe, in the LA County part of it. And so it's really about margins there. And again, sort of returning back to what was already mentioned, there's sort of an interesting mix of people there. It's not really like LA. If you hop over the mountains and you go into Northridge and sort of the valley part of LA, you'll just see how it's sort of night and day from this district.
And I actually have an anecdote as well. I just remember my base instructor. He was like your typical California conservative. He was from the Bay Area and then moved down to that part of LA County back when there was nothing there. To the extent where he went back to visit his family in the Twin Cities area. And he was shocked to find stop signs, stop lights in the middle of nowhere. He was like, why have they wasted all this money out in the middle of nowhere? And then he got there on rush hour for LA traffic, and he's like, wait a second, this is all the way up to LA. Like, the traffic is just, that's why they put these out in the middle of nowhere. It's an area that's changed a whole lot, but it's very friendly to that sort of old school California conservative, because it has Simi Valley, which is where the Reagan Library is. It still voted Republican in 2016. It voted down from Romney, went from like 12 points for Romney to 4 for Trump. But this is still an area that's very rooted in the Reaganism.
District or the county.
Mm-hmm. And that's what Mike Garcia is playing into. Yes, he supports Trump, but he's not aggressive about it. It's just, he's the Republican. I support Republican. He'll talk about immigration, but it's in the same context of, we got to have more people like me coming here legally. We want to expand that in addition to other things. And he's also playing into defense, because defense is a big thing still in Southern California. That Christy Smith video of her making fun of him for being a fighter pilot. Maybe one of the stupidest things I've ever seen.
She made
Especially in that part of California. I mean, it's still a blue collar.
It's a
area
very
in
effective
places.
advertisement using that though.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they put an advertisement out the next day after seeing that Zoom video. It's just mind-boggling.
That's the thing I think people were most upset about, because I mean, it's one thing to like say something out of turn and then be like, oh my god, I shouldn't have said that. It's another thing to wait 5 days until they put out an attack ad before you say something that like along the lines of, oh wait, I messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to thought Christy Smith was a good candidate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few quick things about the district. And basically right here on our hands, we've got a very, very competitive special election. And I agree, and I think most pundits agree, that this race is a toss-up race. And I've heard some, even Democrats, say that they believe it's tilt Republican. And it's a very close race. Now, for the California House races this year, they have the advantage, number one, of this race of not running against an incumbent because it's a vacant seat, and it's a lower turnout election because it's not on the same day as a presidential election or even a midterm year. And I also think it's important to note that Mike Garcia is one of the best Republican candidates for a House seat in California. And you see that with his message. He's not a career politician. He's a veteran, a Navy veteran, and a businessman, and he has a strong fundraising base. You know, a lot of Republicans, like running against Katie Porter or Josh Harder and Ted House and Greg Raths, are struggling at fundraising, but I would say Garcia's, since he's leading Smith in fundraising, especially after that incident with Smith insulting his military service, has now entered the fundraising league with Young Kim and Michelle Steele, other good Republican candidates in California. The final thing I wanted to say about this race, though, is that even though the seat voted for, I just pulled up the data, voted for Clinton by 6.7%, the margin here is going to be much smaller in the special election, even if Christy Smith wins. And even if Garcia wins the special election, which you guys have all been saying would pretty much come from him running up margins in the more conservative regions of the district, he would have a much tougher time winning re-election to a full House term in November, when you've got more Democrats turning out to vote for Joe Biden as well, whom this district will likely vote for. But yeah, I think it's going to be really a very interesting special election, and Christy Smith is just definitely a subpar candidate against a strong GOP candidate in a seat that otherwise would probably be won by the Democrats.
Yeah. Newsom only won it by 2%. So he doesn't, and that's in a Democrat plus 7 years. So he doesn't need to win a lot, if any, Newsom voters to really win this special election.
I think Genya was going to say
Can I just say, like, when I saw... Sorry, can I just... Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, like, when I started following this, I thought, like, Christy Smith, when she started running, I thought she was going to be like Katie 2.0. I thought she was going to be like the exact same sort of candidate, but then, like, as soon as I found out that I know that pretty much sums up. Like, yeah, but she's clearly in a completely different league in terms of like candidate quality and background as well. I mean, Hill was from a law enforcement family, wasn't she?
Yeah, her dad's a cop in Beverly Hills.
I don't really know much about it, but sorry.
No, she did serve in the assembly, though.
She served in the assembly, but then in the absolute worst political chess move in California history, she went for Katie Hill. Really should have forced them to vote her out or forced a recall election. Because as it stands now, guess who won the assembly? Guess who controls the Assembly District 38, her old seat? The GOP.
Yeah.
So she practically handed the seat to Suzette Martinez Valadares, who is another charismatic Latino Republican who's got a bright future ahead of her. And so now the Assembly District is now Republican, State Senate now Republican. If Mike Garcia takes this in the House, we're right back where we started. So it would also confirm one of the things I thought privately is that the blue wave in certain areas was kind of a fluke. Katie Hill was special, and because people came to vote for Katie Hill. Nothing against Christy Smith, but if people vote for her, they're not voting for Christy Smith. They're voting for the Democratic candidate. And that really does make a difference. Also, Hill was a much more proficient fundraiser. Mike Garcia's fundraising blew me away, especially when I heard about how much he'd raised from January. And the difference between Smith and Garcia, most of Garcia's donations are in district, and so are his endorsements. So he could get donors and endorsements from people who could actually vote for him, which is very smart. You know, when he got the Buck McKeon endorsement, Buck McKeon endorsing Garcia over Steve Knight, that's harsh. But that was when I realized, okay, Garcia is a serious player here.
Well, one thing that's fascinated me about
that's
this is
why I was
think,
surprised when I know what sort of candidate she was.
I'm kind of fascinated.
And yeah, like I remember I said it on the.
Sorry, you go ahead. I'll say afterward.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
So one thing that fascinated me about the seat is Hispanic Republicans have actually been pretty strong, and not just this seat, but the assembly seat. The Christy Smith ran against a Hispanic Republican. He was the former mayor of one of the cities. I believe it was in the district. And Santa Clarita. Yeah, he was the mayor of that city, and I can't remember his name, but he was a good candidate. She ran a weird campaign against him where she kind of darkened his skin tone and took some acting images and made it look like he was a thug, like a member of MS-14 or 13, and it was bizarre. And so she kind of had an issue running against a Hispanic Republican to begin with. She won in the blue wave, a little bit over the sky. But now she's facing another charismatic Hispanic Republican and has made another major gaffe. It's almost like she has an issue kind of working when you can't go after him as a white man. Like you can't go after him as he's just this old Trump guy on the future. It's kind of weird to be in that sort of situation. The Republicans have gotten good recruits in the area, which is just kind of fascinating because I assumed LA County was just gone. Like there was no part of it that could work anymore. Ventura County was gone. Orange County's gone. I was just looking at doom in all of Southern California except for Ken Colder's seat, assuming he survives next time, redistricting. And this is kind of giving me hope, like maybe Republicans could be a little bit stronger if they actually cared about their candidates and put a little bit more thought into it than just, well, it's California, we don't need to worry about it, we're not going to win anyway. Go after the seat. It's reasonably competitive. You test the waters just a little bit. I don't know.
We've got Santa Clarita in particular has a kingmaker. His name's Joe Messina. Yes, that Joe Messina, the one who started the ball rolling with the whole Katie Hill scandal. And no Republican gets through without Joe Messina's help. And he's certainly pretty good about keeping an eye on all the little baby Republicans.
And there's one other thing. I think you mentioned in one of our chats that some of the seat is precincts in LA County, and it was kind of strange that they were kind of tied into the rest of the seat. I don't know if you want to talk about it here, but it was. Yeah, I found it fascinating, just the internal politics of LA. I had never known that there was much more beyond, just it's a Democrat, you vote for him. I didn't know it was that, that wild.
Oh, it definitely is. I wonder why everybody's so obsessed with controlling the place, because there's really not that much there except for, housing developments. But yes, it is what keeps California 25 is in a lot of ways a necessary check on a total Democratic takeover of the state. And that's why the Democrats want that seat so badly. And they had that briefly, and of course that blew up in their faces. So although they want 25 back, I think it's probably better to have at least some balance there, just so, people can, remain as checks on each other. Because otherwise, I think City of LA would probably control a lot more of the district than it currently does.
Mm-hmm. Because LA isn't a majority of the county. It's not a majority of LA County, the city. You've got Long Beach, you've got other major cities in that area. They're also important, but they also have a lot of people in it. It's not just the city dominating the county like Cook County.
I wanted to bring up your point earlier. I think Eric made the point of diverse Republicans struggling to win primaries elsewhere, but in California, they managed to nominate diverse candidates. Obviously, this year, Republicans struggled with recruitment against Katie Porter and Josh Harder, but in three fairly competitive seats, even though they all voted for Clinton in 2016 and will likely vote for Biden, in District 39, 48, and obviously 25, the Republicans have solid recruits there. I mean, Young Kim and Michelle Steele are both Korean-American women, and obviously David Garcia has a Hispanic background, so that definitely helps him in the 25th district. But I was going to ask you guys as well, should Garcia win the special election, which is a possibility since it's a toss-up, in a full presidential election environment this November when he's up for his election to a full term, do you guys think he ends up losing? Because I think Smith could actually have a better shot when Biden's also carrying the district and pulling out voters in November. So I would definitely say that Smith would be maybe a lean favorite in November. But I'm curious to see what you guys think.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. And
I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
I was going to bring up November because. Yeah, sorry, Jared, you speak. I was just saying that.
the nature of this election with, a lot of this mail-in ballot influence with coronavirus happening, it's going to affect the results. And we're already seeing that with the initial returns. I know that ballot harvesting was a big issue back in 2018 with a lot of really close elections, but I think that regardless, Biden is going to be very strong, especially among those moderate, socially liberal, fiscally maybe moderate to conservative people who live in these regions. And so I don't think there's no doubt in my mind that Biden's going to be very well in districts like California 25th, California 48, California 45, California 39, and the other districts that flipped Democrat in 2018. And I don't think that Garcia, despite his popularity, despite his sensibilities and his understanding of the people of the district, I don't think he has any chance of being able to hold on, given the national tide that's going to come over his district in November.
You think incumbent will have an impact?
All right.
I'm sorry.
You got to remember, this district has not had congressional representation in over 6 months. They haven't had anybody advocating or fighting for them or district funding since Katie Hill resigned. And they really want the media circus to just be over. They are tired of people coming in. This is not an area that's, like I said, it's not really like LA. So they just want a representative who's going to shut up, do their job, advocate for his constituents or their constituents, and make sure they stayed in contact with home. And whoever wins, as long as they just do their job for the next few months, they're going to be okay in November, because one of the things about California, when you're a voter there, you don't always vote straight ticket. As long as your personal representative is doing their job, you'll vote for them, and then you vote for the other party for everybody else. I know this because I
remember you saying that in the chat earlier today.
And then I voted for Buck McKeon for representative. So I voted for Green and Republican on the same ballot before.
Yeah, one thing that was fascinating. Another candidate that should be talked about is David Valdo. He's arguably favored to win his seat back against T.J. Cox in a Democratic seat that was drawn to be Democratic, Hispanic seat. But he's very popular there. He lost arguably because of ballot harvesting. It was really a fluke that David Valdo lost. I actually noticed James in the chat had mentioned that Democrat advantage kind of is artificially inflated in California just because of what the map looks like. It's not a very favorable map for Republicans. There's a lot of swing seats that have gone to the left. He said maybe Democrats could lose a couple of seats. I could kind of see that if that Valley seat goes this way. If California 25 kind of gets shored up to take in more of the Republican Ventura County areas and ditch the LA city precincts that are in there that are kind of strange, that don't really make a whole lot of sense. But it all depends on the commission, because California has an independent commission. They didn't really do their job in 2010, from what I can tell. They kind of allowed themselves to be influenced by political parties, political candidates. Hopefully they do their job this time, because you see some more interesting races like this. I know a lot of Korean Americans, Vietnamese Americans were upset that Asian areas were split up, even in the new maps, which has kind of diluted their voting strength. So maybe you see those Asian Republicans that are pretty decent candidates have a little more strength if those areas are consolidated instead of being split apart. Just something I thought of.
I've got a question. What do you expect to be the margin of the election? Say like at midnight after the results come in, because they'll be counting for weeks. Do you think it will be like something similar to 2018, where it was it would be plus 6, and then it ends up swinging to be about high by the final result? What do you guys think?
It's a possibility, but you've got to remember, there will be very few conditional ballots, which is same-day registration, and there will be very few provisional ballots this time. California has a horrible habit of issuing way too many provisional ballots. I think they issue 1/4 of the United States issued provisionals, and they don't really need to. So that's one of the things that helps Democrats, is that they get a lot of conditional and provisional balloting. And this time there won't be much. So it's either you voted by mail, you showed up at a vote center, or nothing. So there's not going to be all these late stragglers and manually adjudicated provisionals that they have to contend with. Ventura should probably be done within a week and a half, if that. They've only got at most 73,000 ballots to track.
Yeah.
So is there going to be a big
No,
margin change?
I noticed Robert's joining.
It's a slight shift. If there's
Sorry, was that a question? I didn't get all that.
It's all right. What did I break up?
Yeah. Sorry. It's just my thing is cutting off a bit, so I'm not really hearing. I'm not hearing much of what's being said.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's not your fault. I think it's something on my end.
So we kind of extended all the energy on California, or we still a little bit more that can be said. I know Robert just popped in. Do you have any thoughts on California?
Yes. Hello, Eric. Apologies on being late. On the California 25, I would say, obviously it's been I don't want to use the word mishap, but for Democrats, this has clearly not been the story they thought they were going to get out of this. I think most of them thought when this was called easy win and this won't be a massive headache. Obviously now it looks like on Christy Smith's own blunders that she's made herself into a race that she very well could lose. I think as what's been reported out from Democratic circles is pretty much showing that they're bracing themselves for a defeat, that they do not look confident. I do think it proves a theory. I think too many people, looked at this district and say, Katie Hill won by 9. I think people forget that candidate quality still matters, and I think Mike Garcia is a good candidate for the district. I mean, his military background fits the area, which has a very high military population, and regardless of whether he wins this time or loses in the fall, wins both, I think he's established a route for Republicans to slowly begin a fight back in some of those suburban seats they lost in 2018.
And that's important. That is really important. You saw candidates in 2014 for Republicans that won in a couple of seats that you wouldn't have thought. They did really well. Kind of the Elise Stefanik's or the John Katko's of the world kind of gave them a model of how you operate in some of these areas, right? Even if they can't progress in the state, it still gives you a model of how to operate within it, how to kind of be competitive, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason Republicans shouldn't be able to be competitive in Simi Valley. I mean, aside from Trump, there's really that area is still there's still a lot of Republicans there. There's still a lot of people who grew up voting that way.
Yeah.
You would think there would be a market for something of the party there.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Eric, the one thing that I think is interesting is Christy Smith actually has a closer margin in the Ventura County part of California 25 than she does in Los Angeles County.
Interesting.
I was surprised.
Wow.
I was genuinely shocked to see that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which part of the district is she from? Is she from?
Especially because she's leading. There are 2 cities she's leading in, but that's about it.
So she's losing more in the LA County part of it than in the Ventura County part of it.
Shockingly, yes. Her leads are in the city of Los Angeles controlled precincts by about maybe 1,000 vote margin or 1,000 vote count, and then in city of Lancaster. But she's ahead by like maybe 3 votes, and there are 3 times as many Democrats as Republicans.
Yeah, that's not a good sign for her.
Yeah, Lancaster and Palmdale are the 2 big cities in the Antelope Valley area, kind of anchored at the top of that district. For anyone who's not entirely familiar with the area, because a lot of people forget this is past the mountains. The LA County doesn't split in any reasonable portion. It just kind of goes right over the mountains, and it's very different up there than the south.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So
sorry, go ahead.
So I guess one thing we could do is kind of, who would you rather be going into the election night? How much would you rather, if you had to pick right now, which person would you rather be right now going into election night, which is only 5 days away? It's very soon. Who would you rather be?
I'd rather be Mike. Even if I didn't win, I'd still show that I was a viable candidate, bankable, and I can always pursue other office. If I were Christy Smith, I'd be I lost, I'd be like, oh God, I just locked myself out of a seat that I held.
I think so. Yeah, I think Mark Garcia. I would be right on Mark, and I think even if he hasn't lost, at least for local Republicans, they have gotten something out of this. At least getting a state house or state senate seat, I forget which one it is, back into their own column out of this.
It's tough, but I'd probably say I would go with Mike Garcia, maybe by, it could be less than 1%, or it could be by 1%, but it's going to be a very close election, regardless of who wins. But I would probably say Garcia narrowly.
I do not know.
I agree with that.
I was leaning towards Smith just because of sort of my my preconceptions and sort of what I saw back in 2018. I have to say, pure toss up right now. I mean, I see why Garcia should be very confident about what he's going into. I just do not know enough to be able to make a valid and accurate prediction right now.
Well, you can borrow all of my notes. I've probably gone through about 10,000 pages of FEC pages and voter records.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
definitely keep an eye on the seat. Definitely keep an eye on the seat. And if you haven't already, read Genya's articles. She's written 2 of them on Elections Daily about California 25. Read the first one that she wrote. I believe it was back in January. And then the most recent one, she predicted that Mike Garcia would be a viable candidate, if not favorite, in the Republican side. And then the latest article, which she goes into another deep dive into the entire district. So, really good area.
Yeah, they're good articles.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for the plug, too. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Eric,
seriously, they're fantastic.
Can you pick someone in the thing who you would rather be?
Oh, yeah, I'd rather be Mark Garcia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, even if he doesn't win, he could still maybe transplant over into Kern County and try to win a seat there if something changes in that redistricting. Or there's areas he can go to if he proves himself viable, because they're not just going to get a recruit like him, even if he doesn't win. Because it's a tough seat in theory for them. So I don't think they'll just let him go away and just kind of vanish into thin air. He's going to have somewhere. It's either going to be Congress or it's going to be somewhere else in California.
You want to move on to the Northeastern House races now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so
people are waiting.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And let's get one more thought in from Jared before
to talk about.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I guess I'll put in one more thought. I'll just say Northeastern House races. I would say look at Maine's 2nd District. There was a lot of controversy there with Paula Quinn and Jared Golden, and it's a district that I think is going to vote for Trump by at least a few points. Republicans, otherwise, I think are basically toast in most, if not all, other districts, just because Biden will do well. He has pretty moderate appeal, and even those people who were sort of ancestrally Republican, looking at Drew Savicki's article on the Gold Coast of Connecticut, people like that, I don't think they're going to be swinging back anytime soon. I think Greenwich and cities like New Darien are still going to be pretty comfortable for Biden, even with their ancestral Republican tendencies. So on that note, I'll head out.
Yep. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you very much
for joining us for this period. We're going to go on to the next part of the panel, the next panel, which is the discussion about these Northeastern House races. But thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, nice job.
Yeah. See ya.
Yeah. So looking at these Northeastern House races, I think we can go state by state, because there's basically 3 states in the Northeast, 4 with competitive House races. You've got that one in Maine, you've got a few in Pennsylvania, New York, and then obviously a few in New Jersey as well. So if you look at that, we can start there, and we can just go state by state, I guess, and we can all talk about what we want to see. So one thing I just wanted to say first about Maine, because it's kind of that oddball, it's the one competitive New England race. Jared Golden's a blue dog Democrat there. He was actually one of only 2 Democrats to vote against one of the impeachment proceedings against Trump in the House. And the last Democrat to represent that seat before Paula Quinn, Mike Michoud, who had French ancestry, was also a blue dog Democrat. So the district likes their blue dog Democrats. They didn't vote for Emily Kane in 2016 or 2014, even though she was favored to win. It's important to note, though, that in 2018 they introduced ranked choice voting. And if you look at the election before ranked choice voting, Bruce Paula Quinn actually narrowly held his seat. But then once the results were retabulated, Golden flipped it. Basically, the name of the game, it's a toss-up race. If Golden wants to beat Eric Brackey, who ran against Angus King in the 2018 Senate race, he needs to outrun Biden by a fair deal because Trump's most is likely going to win Maine's 2nd district again, albeit by a narrow margin. But Golden's not toast, I wouldn't say, but it's going to be a close race.
And that's a very Trumpy area. Working class is the whitest congressional district in the country, if I remember right. It's one of the most rural, but it's also a place that voted for Obama by double digits.
Yeah, third most rural.
Yeah, it's also one of the largest congressional districts, and it's largely empty. There are a lot of unorganized areas in that district.
I think it's the largest east of the Mississippi, if I recall right. It's a very, very large state. People don't realize how big of a state Maine is.
Yeah, it rivals Minnesota 7 and Minnesota 8. Those are also very large districts. So do we want to move to Pennsylvania? I think Joe can talk about some of the races there.
Oh, all right. Sounds like fun. So, in Pennsylvania, you have, you could argue probably 3 that people are going to be talking about and that have been brought up maybe. You've got Pennsylvania's 8th district, where Matt Cartwright, who is a Democrat, is running for re-election. This is one of the more surprising close races in 2016. Cartwright is up in that northern area, that Scranton and that whole area, Lackawanna County up there area. His race was a lot closer than expected, and Donald Trump did a lot better up there than a lot of people expected to. Looking at it right now, it looks like Cartwright's going to come out ahead. His opponent isn't really doing anything in the way of fundraising. Some people talk about it, saying like this one of these 2 candidates could be good, but no one's really challenging him at all with fundraising, which has become a real issue for Republicans in an area that they really hope to be competitive in, and that they need to be competitive in the future to win in Pennsylvania with the swing of the Philadelphia suburban area and places like Bucks and Berks County, where those areas are going very more closely towards Democrats. And speaking about Bucks County, Pennsylvania's 1st congressional district is probably one of the very few failures for Democrats in the last couple of cycles with recruitment and with trying to gain a House seat. Brian Fitzpatrick represents this seat, and he's definitely one of the more moderate Republicans out there, and he represents an area that's continuing to trend towards Democrats. He survived in 2016. He survived in 2018 by the skin of his teeth, and Democrats have had a really hard time trying to find a candidate for this race. Their first favorite dropped out because of certain issues she had outside of the campaign. There were talk and there was stuff about her potentially there was talk about campaign staff abuse and all that, which really looked down upon her as a candidate. She had to drop out, and now they're really getting outrun by that little Fitzpatrick machine that goes on in Bucks, and it's really hurting the Democrats there. And the race, in my opinion, that's actually going to be the closest one in Pennsylvania. You've got to start looking at Pennsylvania's 10th district. This is a suburban Harrisburg district, part of the redrawn map from 2018, that is represented by a Republican that not many, if you're a Politico, not many would really expect to do well here, Scott Perry. He's a member of the House Freedom Caucus. He's based in York, which this district does take a little bit of York, but it used to be all of York County, which used to make it much, much more red than it is now. Now it takes in a lot of Harrisburg. It takes in a lot of Dauphin County and Hershey, which is much more left-leaning area. And he's really got a tough candidate. Pennsylvania's Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale, is running for this seat since he's term limited in 2020. And there's a lot of concern whether or not Perry can survive. I have more thoughts. I mean, if anyone else wants to maybe talk about that one, I think that's the one that should really be talked about, is the 10th congressional district, because I think that's the one that has the most likely chance of being truly competitive. Mm-hmm. But
there was one thing I wanted to add, because you're doing a really great job, but just wanted to add, since you brought up DePasquale, in his Auditor General race in 2016, he actually carried the current 10th district in that race, while Hillary Clinton lost it by quite a substantial margin. So just wanted to
but when it comes to row offices in Pennsylvania, there you still see a lot more ticket splitting. Obviously, all 3 Pennsylvania row offices, the Attorney General, the Treasurer, and the Auditor General, are all held by Democrats, even though Donald Trump won the state by about 50,000 votes. None of those races were close to that margin at all. People like Josh Shapiro, Joe Torsella, and the aforementioned DePasquale all won by about 3 to 4 point margins. which has allowed Democrats to continue to build what has been a pretty strong bench in Pennsylvania. But Dave Pasquale's run into some problems himself. He really hasn't been able to raise money like Democrats, I think, hoped he would. Maybe that's because people are maybe paying attention to this race, or maybe that he's just not bringing the attention that they wanted. But he's been outraised by Scott Perry, one of the very few in these kind of suburban area seats where Democrats are being outraised by a Republican opponent. And Perry's done a surprisingly good job of raising money and seemingly keeping this race close, where maybe, in a lot of cases, a place like this new 10th district really shouldn't be.
Right.
One thing I'll add it. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, you're done.
I was just going to say Pennsylvania's proof candidate quality still matters. Matt Cartwright's a good fit for his seat. Very good fit, actually, even though he's more progressive than you would fit. What's on? Brian Fitzpatrick is a perfect fit for his seat. He's a very pro-union Republican, which is really weird in most parts of the country, but it works there. And then in the 10th district, you have Democrats have a credible candidate, and Republicans have a candidate who's raising money. So candidate quality matters. You don't just say, just look at the fundamentals of a seat and be like, this seat voted for Hillary Clinton. It has to vote for a Democrat. It really doesn't in a lot of cases.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just,
I've talked too much.
Pennsylvania's voting system is changing drastically. They were one of the last states that had used the direct recording electromechanical voting machines. And they've now switched over to ballot marking devices. And there's been a push, obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, to go over to all vote by mail. Do you think that will have much of an effect on the elections in Pennsylvania?
For now, we've it's only vote by mail for right now for the primaries on June the 2nd. Our rescheduled primaries right now, only those are vote by mail. Of course, like all across the nation, there really hasn't been made a decision on the main election in November. But that's probably some good news for a candidate like Eugene D. Pasquale. Actually, D. Pasquale is facing a challenge from his left. Hershey-based lawyer named Tom Breyer is running to his left. D. Pasquale was favored anyway, as he's been endorsed by the Democratic, the DCCC and all that. But certainly when you're in a vote by mail election and Breyer, would have much younger support, it's going to be changed from, maybe this guy that could pull off an upset to Dick Pasquale is all but certain to be a candidate running against Scott Perry come November. And, I think it'll be interesting to see if Pennsylvania goes vote by mail. I think we're going to see a lot older demographic and maybe even a little bit more informed demographic. You have to apply to get a vote. You wouldn't get it like in California where they would just send it out to you. You would have to apply to get that vote by mail ballot still, and you'd have to apply to get that those other ballots. So it would be interesting to see how that would work in certain states like Pennsylvania where we're not used to having vote by mail, and maybe our systems aren't as up to date as some other states. So, it'll be interesting to see what would happen there, personally.
I think Adam had some thoughts as well.
Yeah. So on Pennsylvania, just trying to go through those. Pennsylvania 8 actually perfectly showcases the exact kind of place where Cartwright, on paper, it's a district that Trump won. It's a district Trump could win again. And I think Biden will probably significantly outperform Hillary Clinton. It still voted for Trump by, I want to say, 9. But the row office Democrats, I think all of them won. I think Torcello in particular ran up the score there. And Cartwright, Cartwright's personal brand really is effective there. I mean, if you look going back to the district in the 2012 redistricting, and that district was actually drawn for a Democrat incumbent, Tim Holden, who had survived 2010 in a much redder district. And so it was designed where in the old district, I believe it's Schuylkill County. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, that's right. You got it on the money.
Schuylkill County, which was Holden's base and is a ancestral Democratic, very trended hard right in 2016. But very essentially Democratic. And then they drew in Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. Did I get Wilkes-Barre? Or?
Yeah, yep, that's Wilkes-Barre, yep.
All right. And then I think also Easton in the old district to try to make it, just try to pack in Democrats there. And then in the end, Holden ended up losing the primary to Cartwright. And I mean, Holden had a very strong brand. He really ran up the score in his home part of the district, and just simply wasn't enough, which is emphasized the strength of Cartwright there. So Cartwright, he's actually quite progressive on a lot of things, but he's managed to combine a lot of populist appeal that really works in that district, which is why this district is, you know, a lot to the left in terms of ratings of where you expect it to be based on election results aside that. But and then Pennsylvania won again candidate equality with Fitzpatrick. But I think we've sorry, I feel like I'm going over street riding ground at this point. Sorry, but and then PA 10, and with that one, I'm optimistic about D. Pasquale, and the reason why is just because if you look at the district, you have all of Dawson in it, so that's Harrisburg. Harrisburg has a non-insignificant minority population that will turn out in larger numbers in the presidential election or the midterm. You then have Cumberland County, which you have a significant college student population there. That also you have a good chance and of higher presidential turnout. And then you have York, which is the city of York in the district, or
I don't believe so. Actually, I believe the city of York.
I think it is. I think it is. Yeah.
It is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the city of York.
I think that's what makes it so swingy. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, York County itself.
The city of York, yeah.
Yep. So, you know, York County itself is quite conservative. That's why the old district wasn't competitive and never would be competitive. But only having the city of York and then some of the rural areas you have in the north of it basically makes it close enough to being purple that it doesn't, that D. Pasquale isn't going to get killed in the York County portion anymore. Or essentially his route to victory is running up the score in Dauphin and not getting killed in Cumberland and York. So
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that interests me about that district is that York is red, but it's not red enough to make the whole district like unwinnable for Democrats.
We were talking about recruitment issues for Republicans and for Democrats, and there's also select few for Republicans as well. Certainly, Pennsylvania 1 and New York 24, you've got strong moderate Republican incumbents like Fitzpatrick and Kotko. Those are strong candidates against whom the Democrats have not nominated any credible challengers, like Dana Balter. If Dana Balter wins the primary again this time, Balter struggled in 2018, and that seat voted for Clinton. And again, Pennsylvania 1's another example. I think you saw Scott Wallace in 2018 there spend more money than any House candidate in a general election cycle, but he still couldn't crack the seat. And now you've got Finello running for the seat there. And the opposite is true for the Republicans in many of these Northeastern House races as well, such as New York's 19th district, where they wanted either John Faso to run for the seat again because he previously represented it, or Mark Molinaro, who ran against Andrew Cuomo for governor in 2018. Neither entered the race, and now you have three Republicans, Ola Hawadame, Kyle Vanderwater, and Mike Roth. Neither of any of those candidates have any major political background or fundraising abilities, which is why a Trump seat is now potentially being rated as likely R, kind of a similar fashion to Pennsylvania, or likely D in a similar way to Pennsylvania 8. And in New York's 22nd district, Claudia Tenney is controversial, but Brindisi is also, despite being a member of the Blue Dog Caucus and being relatively popular, also kind of unaccomplished as a member and overshadowed by some of the other freshman Democrats that represent some of these swingy seats. So Tenney could very well end up flipping that district back, despite personal qualms that some voters have with her. That in New York 11, where you have Nicole Malliotakis against Max Rose, who upset the seat from Dan Donovan in 2018. Malliotakis is another very qualified candidate to win, although she's being slightly outraised right now. And finally, for Republicans, in New Jersey, Republicans have had some recruitment failures as well, such as in New Jersey's 11th district, Rosemary Beishy is running a dumpster fire campaign in a district that narrowly voted for Trump, but will likely vote for Biden in 2020, and Mikey Sherrill there is very, very popular. And I mapped it out earlier. If you look at the uniform swing from the presidential race there to her 2018 win over Assemblyman Weber, it was a very large win. It was by double digits, 12 points, and she's got a lock on that seat for sure. And Josh Gottheimer in the neighboring 5th district, Republicans there are running McCann once again for the seat, who lost it by double digits in 2018 as well. And that's another seat where the Bergen County suburbs trending towards the Democrats have helped Gottheimer solidify his base there. Now, Republicans have good candidates in New Jersey as well. Jeff Van Drew switched parties to the Republicans, but still functions as a relatively strong incumbent. A Democratic primary there is going to be interesting to see. You got Amy Kennedy, who's a relative of Patrick Kennedy's wife, running against Ricky Callahan Harrison there. Harrison has the endorsements of Steve Sweeney and Cory Booker. But you've also got education groups and unions endorsing across the aisle, and there's some big competition there, particularly amongst the New Jersey Department of Educators. And one last thing about that district as well, it's probably a lean R district. Van Drew's the incumbent. He has a strong fundraising lead. But regardless of who wins the primary, both candidates should be able to compete in the general election, but it's a messy primary. In the 3rd district, Andy Kim, many rated his seat as a toss-up after he beat MacArthur in 2018 because the district did vote for Trump by 6 points. But Kim, his seat's actually been moved to lean Democrat by some, like Politico and Sabato's Crystal Ball. Kim has established himself as a local leading figure. I wrote about this in my article during the coronavirus. He helped get important medical supplies to vulnerable hospitals within his district, and Governor Murphy even praised him for his work during that. And in fact, he's been named to a select committee to investigate the coronavirus response in Washington. His opponents there are Kate Gibbs, who's racked up a bunch of establishment endorsements, the NRCC, Kevin McCarthy, who's a Republican minority leader, and then David Richter, who was pushed out of the 2nd district race when Van Drew switched parties. That primary is going to be interesting. Richter can sustain himself with fundraising to a greater degree than Gibbs, but Gibbs is definitely the establishment national favorite. She's a freeholder who's more moderate than Richter, who's a conservative businessman and will struggle to, he will make the race competitive, but I feel like his campaign could potentially backfire on Republicans if he makes gaffes like Seth Grossman and Jay Weber in their 2018 campaigns. And finally, in New Jersey's 7th district, Tom Malinowski is also very popular in the district. He has strong grassroots support, and the southern regions of Somerset County and all of Somerset County in general have been trending towards the Democrats, and I mapped this out as well. And Tom Keene Jr., who is the minority leader of the state assembly, who's run for Senate, U.S. Senate before, and is the son of the popular former governor Tom Keene Sr., is running against Malinowski. This is probably the Republicans' best candidate in the whole state, but it's still a district that voted for Clinton, and it's going to continue to trend to the left. And in fact, I mapped it out. It's a district that voted for McCain in its current form in 2008, but is now a Clinton district. And I think it's going to be very interesting. It's a lean Democratic race just because of the leanings of the district. But Tom Keene is still a good candidate there. He'll probably end up narrowly losing and staying in the state Senate, but that's just my spiel. I just think it's really important to learn about all those races like that.
One quick comment on Kate Gibbs is that she's basically trying to be Brian Fitzpatrick 2.0. She's also a union. She actually works for a union. She's very much a pro-union Republican along that same line. It just she doesn't have that local machine that Fitzpatrick does.
Yeah.
Yep. So if I can jump in for a second on some of the New York and New Jersey seats, just because I live in New York City, I go to school in Bergen County. So on that note, one thing worth noting. In New York, too, you have Peter King, a popular Nassau County Republican, really the last remaining part of the Nassau GOP machine from the 1980s and the 1990s. He is retiring, and that's going to be a competitive election. It was an Obama-Trump district, but it's worth noting Obama really only won it in 2012 because of his response to Hurricane Sandy, which really impacted the district. And I think Jackie Gordon's a stronger candidate than people are giving her credit for in terms of that. So then really in that district, the Nassau County is generally bluer than Suffolk County, but the Nassau County portion of this district is just the blood red part of Nassau County that kept a Republican for all those years. And the bluer part's really the Suffolk portion. There shouldn't, if I recall correctly. So really it's just about kind of just outperforming in Suffolk and minimizing your losses in Nassau. And then moving on to New York 11. New York 11 is just all of Staten Island and then some neighborhoods in Brooklyn like Bensonhurst, Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights. It's I actually campaigned for Rose in the most recent election. Sorry, in 2018. And in this district, the real dynamic there is you have Staten Island, which is really quite split along the Staten Island Expressway, I-278, which bisects Staten Island, and the areas to the south of it are predominantly Italian, very conservative, full of, 70-30 Republican precincts. And the area to the north of it is quite diverse, quite well educated, and it's mostly consists of people who commute to Manhattan and to work. So then in the Brooklyn portion of the district is a mix. So you have areas like Bay Ridge, traditionally Italian and working class, but still solidly Democratic, along with Orthodox Jews, a growing Chinese community, just all sorts of things. So it's very mixed as a district. And Rose's key to victory is, minimizing losses below the Staten Island Expressway, running up the score in Brooklyn and the areas north of the Staten Island Expressway, which I think he's well positioned to do because he's really established himself in the district as a moderate, as someone who's willing to listen to both sides, and as someone who actively fights for the interests of Staten Island and South Brooklyn. And then going up, New York 19, the Republican primary in that race is just a dumpster fire. It's a dumpster fire. It's a safety district if no one joins in at this point. Honestly, there's just no viable path to a Republican victory. Trump could win it. He's not dragging whoever the Republican is across the line. He's just not. The district is really elastic, and they're just not going to vote against Antonio Delgado if the Republicans don't give them someone to vote for in the first place. And then to go on New York 22. New York 22 was less a vote for Brindisi than a vote against Tenney. Brindisi was a popular assemblyman from Utica, but Tenney really just shot herself in the foot over and over and over again with just gaffe after gaffe after gaffe. And that really damaged her. But regardless of whether or not Brindisi wins this cycle, New York 22 is not going to exist in its current form after redistricting, and whatever district Brindisi does end up in will probably include Ithaca, which is a somewhat large, very blue college town. And then just to move on to New Jersey. New Jersey 5, New Jersey 7, New Jersey 11 are all very similar districts in that they're the high-income, well-educated, increasingly diverse suburban areas that are historically Republican, very much trending blue in recent years. I go to school in Pasquarel's district, which I want to say is 9 or maybe 8, but it's 700 feet outside of New Jersey 5. It's an area that's just chock full of Romney Clinton voters. Or I'd have to estimate maybe 20% of the parents of kids in my high school are Romney Clinton voters. And the reason why you have all this movement is because of mortgage interest and SALT, which is Republicans used to be able to run on, I'm a social moderate and I will lower your taxes through SALT and and now the Republicans have gutted SALT and mortgage interest. They have to learn in New Jersey what it's like to run of taxes as a headwind and not a tailwind. And the result has just been utterly devastating for them at the congressional level. Well, because they're really just not giving the suburbanites anything to vote for at this point. I mean, if you're not going to, they're socially moderate and they're not going to lower, and the Republicans aren't going to do anything to lower your taxes. So, I mean, they're really just not giving the people in New Jersey 5, New Jersey 7, New Jersey 11 a lot to vote for on the issues. Gottheimer is very popular. Sherrill is very popular. Malinowski, I'd say, is slightly less popular than them. And Kane is definitely a stronger candidate than whoever's running against Sherrill and McCann. And
Malinowski is actually fairly popular here, and Gottheimer actually has a progressive challenger because he's been damaged by endorsing Bloomberg and some progressive constituents in the more urban areas of the district in the past the Bergen suburbs are angry.
Yeah, it's not going to get anywhere.
Sherrill
It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, but Malinowski is not as prevalent as Sherrill, and Sherrill's going to one day probably end up in the Senate. But
for sure.
Malinowski is still certainly popular, and in a way, I would say more popular than Gottheimer, because Gottheimer will end up if in redistricting New Jersey, they might draw a vote sink Republican seat in the north and then fortify Chris Smith's seat, and then try to draw a new 7th and 11th district that are essentially relatively safe for the Democrats. That could end up putting Gottheimer in a primary against Sherrill in a seat that's drawn upwards into the Bergen County suburbs that incorporates the lower half of Morris County as well. Gottheimer would lose that primary.
I doubt it. I think if a Democrat gets squeezed in redistricting, they probably squeeze Pascarell and just hope he retires, honestly.
Well, Pascarell doesn't want to retire. I've talked to Ben Kestenbaum about this repeatedly, and Pascarell is not only popular, but enjoys his job profusely despite his age. So Pascarell, according to him, will probably die in the House.
Well, that's certainly interesting. There's a lot of interesting trade-offs because of New Jersey's redistricting system, just how it works with the bipartisan system that has a history of producing bipartisan gerrymanders. Or that ain't it, if you want to be. I mean, would you say that that's the usual outcome of the New Jersey redistricting system?
Yeah, I would say that it ended up being. I mean, earlier the last map in 2010, obviously, it was one of those what we would call now as a dummy mander because it obviously backfired in 2018, like so many other redistricted maps. But when they drew it in 2010, all of those seats, like you had Frelinghuysen in the 11th and Livondo in the 2nd, and you had Garrett, who wasn't quite as unpopular in 2010 as he was when he lost in 2016 in the 5th. So they just did not foresee any of those seats ending up in Democratic hands when they drew that map.
Right. Well, Garrett just isolated everyone of his social conservatism. And I mean, plain and simple, this was before SALT was an issue. Trump won the district. Garrett lost because he couldn't.
That's one of the things that was hard to MacArthur in his re-election against Kim, because MacArthur voted for the Trump tax bill, and MacArthur was significantly more conservative than other moderates like Frelinghuysen and Livondo, who were retiring, or Leonard Lance, who was running for re-election.
Right, or John Runyon, who held the seat before him after beating
John
Adler.
Runyon was definitely someone. Yes, John Runyon was a former football player. He didn't want to make it a career in politics, and he only served those 2 terms because, well, largely he was there as a reformer and someone that just wanted to clean up the district. Adler was swept out of office because of the 2010 environment, not necessarily because of any personal qualms that the people of the district held against Adler at that point.
Yeah.
One thing else I wanted to say real quick, because we were talking about New York 22, and it's kind of a race where you've got some people that are upset on both sides. Obviously, the Republican establishment is kind of holds their nose with Claudia Tenney, who's relatively unpopular in the district despite voting for Trump by 15 points overall. It's a fairly Republican district that Republicans they probably won't exist in redistricting, even though Democrats control New York as a state. But my point was, in addition to the unpopularity of Tenney, I would probably go out on a limb and say Brindisi is more popular. But the reason why it's a toss-up with the potential to flip to the Republicans is in no part due to the fact that in the local Utica political establishment, Brindisi alienated voters because in the 2019 mayoral election, he stood against the incumbent mayor and backed. The incumbent mayor was a longtime Democratic mayor and is actually a friend of one of my aunt's friends. But the point is that he stood against him, and he was basically the Utica establishment to back one of his relatives who had lost a Democratic primary challenge and was running as an independent. That really damaged him among the Utica political machine. So they're still salty with Brindisi over that. And on top of that, Brindisi hasn't had as much exposure as some of the other Democrats we've seen in some of these other suburban seats around the country, like Sherrill, for example, or a Colin Allred, or a Lucy McBath, or even in California, like Katie Hill before Katie Hill resigned. But it's definitely, that's going to be a race to watch. It's definitely the Republicans' best chance at flipping a race in New York.
I 100% agree on that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I know. I know Eric is saying that we should probably wrap up, and this has been going on for an hour and a half. I think we should. I mean, unless anyone else has anything to say, I think we should wrap up.
I think we've done a really good job.
Yeah,
I think we've.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you were all up for this idea.
Yeah. Thanks. And we'll do this again next week, same time, hopefully. So
we will. Yeah. We'll sort it out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys have a great night.
You too.
Yep.
Thank you, you too.